and it started the spiral to what Originally Lovely is today. Hello and welcome to my first vlog, podcast, whatever you want to call it. I wanted to take a little bit of time today and share the story of Originally Lovely. So in case you don't know me, my name is Kaitlin Barthold. I own Originally Lovely, a small natural fiber knitting and crochet yarn company based out of Minnesota. We sell yarns from Italy and Peru that are natural fibers. We really focus on the properties of the fibers themselves and just want to showcase the beauty of these natural fibers and then create patterns that really emphasize those fibers and create pieces that you love to make and wear. It really is like a whole approach. As you know, if you're here, knitting and crochet is so much more than just a hobby. It's a lifestyle, and in my years of doing this, I've connected with so many of you and we all have such similar interests and stories. So I'm hoping my story with this kind of shares a little bit about why I do what I do, kind of the passion behind Originally Lovely, and then also answers questions on how I got into this and how I started selling yarn. So it's hard to explain without going back to the very beginning and kind of telling the story of like my journey with knitting and crochet. I made a little outline here, so hopefully I can stay on track. This is my first video like this, so I hope it turns out okay. Just like starting at the beginning, I guess all the way back to my childhood with knitting and crochet. I learned how to sew at a really young age. I think it was kindergarten. My mom got me a sewing machine and I was just obsessed with like digging into like the patterns and how they worked and the construction, and I thought it was so interesting how you could take something flat and 2D and just little angles could make these beautiful shapes, and the opportunities were just endless. You know, I started looking at all sorts of different clothing and kind of the construction of it all, and it started the spiral to what Originally Lovely is today. So learned how to knit shortly after that. I think it was like first grade, and it was really hard back then. As some of you probably can relate to this, like in the 90s, early 2000s, like the internet wasn't really the place that it is today to find knitting and crochet patterns. So you had to look in books or print patterns or magazines, and a lot of them were not good. I was just not finding patterns that I could really understand, or I felt like there was no consistency across them. It didn't make sense. And then again, I was so young, I was a kid, so I didn't want to make these like baby kids things, but yet the patterns that were tailored for adults were also not appealing to me. So I kind of had to like problem solve and make my own through that. And that is, I guess, kind of how I taught myself how to design patterns. So I grew up in Nebraska and we would go grocery shopping at Walmart, and I would go over to the knitting and crochet section, and they have like a really good craft section, and I would just read the books and like memorize as much as possible. And then I wouldn't buy the books. I don't know, my mom probably would have got them for me if I asked, but I would just go home and like try and memorize what I would read and then go home and do that. And that's kind of like how I stumbled my way through. I made a lot of very, very bad things for a long time, and I was so embarrassed of a lot of my projects. My parents would like show friends that came over like, oh, Kaitlin, why don't you show them this thing you made? And I'm like, oh my gosh, please don't even, like, it doesn't even look good. So it was kind of funny. Now I love showing off what I create, but at the time I was really shy about it. So just like what it meant to me as a child, it was really important. Knitting and crochet was like my favorite hobby. Like those were my favorite toys. My sewing machine was like my favorite toy. I would love it when my mom would take me to the fabric store. I would get like a new ball of yarn, and like one ball of yarn, I would just like use it over and over again, and I would like take it out and make new things. And it was kind of funny. It was just like harder to have access. Like now we have access to so much, but living in the Midwest and way back then, like the early 2000s, I mean, not way back then, but it's just like what I had. Like everything was so much more scarce, and it almost like meant more because of that. You know, media, everything, like we had less of it, so it was like a bigger deal. I can't even imagine what it was probably like way before like the early 2000s, but the internet's changed everything. So that was kind of like my childhood. As I got older, I started to have a really strong interest in the environment. Like I said, I grew up in Nebraska, and then we moved to Minnesota when I got a little older, and my dad worked for an agriculture company, so I was very familiar with like farming and like the struggles of like agriculture. And then I also was developing alongside that like a strong interest in just the environment, animal welfare, natural fibers, and kind of like when I found out what microplastics were, I remember just like, I don't think I could sleep. Like I was so terrified, and I had this like dread over like what we were doing to the planet. And as our food, you know, as I got older, I kind of started to understand like the food and the ways that things were grown and raised and how it changed. And it was just like such a big thing to me. There was even a point where I was like, I joined PETA, and I was like really passionate about all this. I would do like so much research, and in high school it was really like an important thing to me, but it was harder back then. I graduated high school in 2012, and I wanted everything I had. I wanted to wear like all natural fiber clothes. Like I wanted to use like all natural body products, and just different things like that. And it was a lot harder back then, of course. So now there's so many options, but then it's like no one was really talking about this, or fewer people were. So I kind of like put that in the back of my mind. It was still something that like bothered me, and like there was a real anxiety there that like kept me up at night, but I had to kind of put it on the back burner as I like grew up, went to college. Still like a huge passion with knitting and crochet, and of course creating garments, creating clothing, and just all sorts of different things. You know, I made jewelry, I made everything, anything that I could like make with my hands, like tangible items, I was obsessed with. So I went to college in Nebraska then, and I studied architecture, which I loved. I was obsessed with architecture. I still love architecture, but as I went through, I realized that like being an architect was not going to be for me. So I grew up with a stay-at-home mom, and like then at that time, like I was starting to wonder if I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, or if I wanted to have a career. It was hard to decide, but architecture really started to make me think. Like I had 4 years of undergrad, and then like I think 4 years of like master's, for a master's degree, graduate school, and then it would have been like so much time after that before I could take like the architecture tests and everything. And I was like, I don't really see like how I would have kids, like when I still wasn't even an architect. Like I wouldn't accomplish, or like it seemed really hard. And another really big factor to me was that I was taking out loans for college, so all of that schooling, how would I ever be able to pay off those loans? So anyways, I pivoted and I did marketing, and got a minor in art history, and just I loved the connection of like art and math. So that's where the passion for architecture came from, kind of like design, math, and just like problem solving, and natural materials, material integrity. All of that was very important to me. So I knew as I was getting closer to graduating college, I didn't want to take out any more debt. I felt like so well educated in certain things, and so I kind of wanted to combine my skills. You know, I was always a pretty good writer. Like I felt like I was good at photography, good at art, design, like the things that it really does take to like design patterns, or just like work for yourself. I felt like I had those skills. So I started to kind of become aware of like bloggers and like the opportunities of the internet and what you could create and how you could monetize content on the internet. At the time, more so like blogs and ads from blogs and just affiliate income. And I started to kind of piece together a plan that way. And then 2 months before I graduated college, actually, my dad passed away really unexpectedly. And that just made me a little bit more aware of like how short life is, and that this plan that I had was always something that I thought I would do in the future. Like someday I would have time to do that, or like I would get a job, like any job, because I was having a really hard time getting a job. I didn't have good grades, and I was just gonna get a job, and then maybe someday I would work towards this like dream that I had of having like a knitting and crochet content blog website. And then he passed away, and I was like, I don't want to wait for the future. I want to do this now. Like, life is so short, and I just want to follow my dreams now. So I decided, I did get one job offer. I said no, and I just decided to dig right in, start my website, start publishing content, producing tutorials, patterns, and then of course just working on the side, nannying and dog walking, kind of some random things to like make ends meet. It did obviously start to grow, just the content. The main sources of income were like ads and then sponsored content on my website, as well as some affiliate income. I always put a really strong emphasis on my website, my blog, and building that. And I never focused too hard on Instagram or a little bit of Pinterest, but like, and I probably should have focused on those a little bit more in hindsight, but I focused so much on my site and just getting content out there and patterns out there and just like getting traffic, which I do think helped me long term. I know a lot of people who like websites and the way Google ranks things now, websites are a little bit harder, and they've kind of like fallen to the wayside a little bit, just with like AI content and everything. So I do wish I would have focused a little bit more on social media, but it got me to where I am. So while I was working on my website and working with different brands and companies, I learned a lot about like this industry, and I felt like I could take kind of what I learned and kind of pivot and start my own yarn line. I started thinking about my own yarns a couple years, honestly, after I started. So probably like 2018, I started kind of having in the back of my head that eventually I would want to have my own yarns and really focus on natural fibers. I felt like so many of the yarns out there were just kind of pushing like the craft itself, or like the making aspect, or there was like a fast fashion aspect, I guess you could say, of the yarns. And that might still be there, but that also might just be how I consumed the content. How I shopped might have been a little bit fast fashion-y. Like, this isn't I'm not criticizing any companies or businesses or anything, but I was feeling like I wasn't really appreciating the pieces that I was making as much as I could. Like, knitting and crochet is art. Like, you are making a beautiful handmade piece of art, and like, you should love and cherish what you create. And I just like wasn't really obsessed with most things. Like, I love the pattern and everything, and I was getting it all right, but it was like ultimately the yarn that was holding me back, I felt like. So like I talked about earlier, that I always had that passion for the environment and the natural fibers and just kind of the slow fashion way of doing things, and I just wanted to do something different, and I knew kind of what it would take to create like the yarns that I wanted there to be. So I had it in my head that I would do that eventually, and it was 2021, and I kind of decided that I should just do it, and I should just kind of reinvest whatever I was making from the blog into my yarn line and just kind of see where it went. Like, start small and then go from there. I grew up around a lot of entrepreneurs, and I had a lot of like really strong female role models in my life. My husband works in like food manufacturing, so I kind of started to see how like even these manufacturers are like small businesses, and then like I'm a small business. Like, it was so intimidating. I always thought that these places had something that like I didn't have, or like they were so much better than me, but it's like they're small businesses too, perhaps some of them. So I started reaching out and kind of finding mills that I like met my values and kind of shared my vision for the yarn. And then of course wanted to work with someone who was small, because like I wasn't willing, like I couldn't produce that much. So I had to find places that would do like small production runs, and I shared my vision, shared my like passions for the natural fibers, and understood why I wanted it to be this way, and were willing to work with me to create yarns that showcased these natural fibers, because like all the fibers have their own properties, and to create a yarn that showcases those unique specific properties of the fiber is hard to do. And I had to really work to do that and find mills that would partner with me and work alongside that, and we could like come up with something together. So working with all these different companies, I really did feel like I learned kind of a lot about the industry, and once my affiliate income started to really take off in 2021 specifically, I felt like I really understood what people were looking for. I had real data to back up what colors, what fibers, what people wanted in patterns and yarns and everything, and I could kind of like hone in on that into creating what I knew people were looking for and what they wanted. I dug really deeply into a lot of analytics, a lot of keyword research, a lot of just like trends on all different platforms, and really knew where my opportunity was. I would say that my like secret weapon, so to speak, has always been analytics, like always finding opportunities, always doing like the keyword research, and just like really targeting areas that like I knew like people wanted and like I could bring to the table. So after doing that for a long time, I felt like I had a really good idea of what people wanted, and I did end up finding quicker than I would have hoped mills that were willing to work with me and produce different yarns that I wanted, very specifically, even down to the twist, the way it's spun, the way that it was there's so much that goes into it. Like this could be a whole video, but like they were willing to make like what I wanted and at like a small scale so that I could afford to like do these production runs and create the yarns, and all the stars kind of aligned. Like I would really say that if you were wanting to do this, like just start emailing people. Like you're not going to learn unless you ask the questions, and like they will explain and answer. It's not weird. You might be nervous about sounding like you don't know what you're talking about, but like if you sound like you don't know what you're talking about, like that's how you learn, because that's when places explain. So anyways, I did the production runs. I chose my color palette. I had it all organized and imported it all. The import process was tough. Found my warehouse and then launched in November 2021. So I had it out there and it was amazing. Like I was so excited to just bring this to you guys and just see what everyone liked. The favorites has always been Fluff, of course, like it's amazing, and then Lana, the Highland wool, just like those have always been the best. They're Aran weight, which I kind of knew. I was pretty sure that those would be the favorites, and it's just been so amazing to see the projects that you create and the colors and get feedback. Like I do listen to every piece of feedback that people give, and it means a lot. My advice for anyone who wanted to get into this industry or eventually have their own yarn line or have a product of any sort really, especially in the craft industry, is just really focus on what you can give. Don't focus on what you can get. Like don't focus on like the money. Don't go into it looking for money. There's other places to make more money faster, but instead focus on like what you can give. Like I always kept in my mind, like I wanted to be the website that maybe I would have came across when I was a kid and been so excited to find. I'm creating it for her. And I know there's more people out there just like me, you know, my story is not unique. So just focus on what you can give, not what you can get. And I think that a lot of people underestimate the power of free content and tutorials and patterns, whatever it is, just like that free content, especially when you're starting out. I think that free content is so, so important to help people like kind of figure out who you are, you know, figure out what you're all about, figure out how your pattern writing style, if they like your patterns. And it's hard to commit to, you know, a designer you don't know or someone you don't know, buying their pattern versus like if you can check it out first on their site or on Ravelry. I think that's a really good way to get your name out there and kind of grow and just get an audience. I think that it's hard to think you're giving away like something you work so hard on and just giving it away for free, but if you have ads on your site, it's actually not free. Like, you're making money, and you'll probably get more traffic from free content than paid content. So that's a big thing that I advise people. Another is just like, don't like reinvent the wheel, so to speak. I think that a lot of people try and like come up with a brand new, like the craziest, myself included, like a new stitch, a new way to knit. And it's like, you don't have to do that. You can have like the best, like think of a like top down raglan pattern, or like those like hats, the like Carhartt style beanies that are like the double layer, like fold over. Those, there's so many patterns out there for those, but every single one is a little bit different, and there's definitely a couple of them that like stand out above the rest. And it's because those people, like, yeah, they knew maybe there was a pattern out there like it, but like they could bring their own spin on it, their own, even their own gauge, or like their own construction. There's all different ways to do it. So don't like reinvent the wheel or feel like you have to come up with the craziest new thing. You can just do like a basic like garter stitch cardigan. If you have the best pattern for the garter stitch cardigan and like everyone loves it and it brings people into like the knitting and crochet world, then that is amazing. Like, you can, like, what you're giving the world is like the pattern itself. It's not always necessarily the design, if that makes sense. So feel free to like go basic with your designs, or even accessories. Like, you don't need to, if you're starting out, you don't need to do like a 10 size raglan. Like, that's hard to do, but you can have like a killer hat, and that might be like your number one selling pattern of all time. You never know. It could bring 100,000 people to your site. Like, you have no idea, but put it out there. Like, you don't have to reinvent knitting. It's hard to do. There's only so many stitches and they've all been done. Another thing is, I would say, just like really don't compare yourself to others. Like I said, with these other companies that are out there, if I were to pay attention to these other yarn lines, and I would get so intimidated. Like, I've always just kept my blinders on and focused on myself and what I can do and what I'm bringing to the table. If I was focusing on these other ones, like, I would have so much anxiety about trying to keep up, and like, I'm never going to be them, or like, I probably will never be them. Like, they are huge. And so put on your blinders and just focus on what you can do. Focus on what you can give. Don't compare yourself to others. And with that kind of comes my next point, is to find inspiration outside of knitting and crochet. Don't like find your inspiration for patterns or tutorials or what you want to make within the knitting and crochet world, because that's how you get kind of repetitive, and you're not going to stand out at that point, and you'll lose your sparkle, what really sets you apart and what you have to bring to the table. Instead, just look for inspiration outside of knitting and crochet. Like, what is it that you want to wear this summer, or like a specific feeling or event, or like colors are very inspiring. Even fashion itself, like the runways, like there's so much beautiful inspiration out there. I would just go to that, and so that you can keep your sparkle and stay in like your lane with what you're special with, and that's how you make your pieces stand out. And then again, if you are looking someday to make a product or make a yarn line or anything really, I would say just like grow your audience first and get that relationship with your audience. A lot of the times this can be nurtured through the free content and just like the free things. Like with my website, it was all free for the longest time. Every single thing was free, and that really grew an audience to me, that I was able to like learn from my audience, like what they wanted, what I wanted, and like what would work for all of us. And pay attention to what your audience likes. If you have certain patterns or posts that everyone's obsessed with, or like that are performing way better than other ones, like, why is that? Ask yourself, ask your audience. You could literally ask them, because it might surprise you what people are looking for. You have to keep in mind that there's so many facets of knitting and crochet. You know, this is our hobby. This is a craft. It's a way we relax. It's something that we're creating art. Like, you're an artist. And then you also have that finished piece. Like, you're touching so many aspects of the knitter or the crocheter's life. Make it count. Like, it matters to them in so many ways. And what are you bringing to the table that they might be looking for. So all of this to say, my very long-winded way to say thank you for being here. It means a lot, you know. Originally Lovely is not like some corporate thing. Like, it's literally such a small team. Me and Emily, my husband a little bit here and there, my mom a little bit here and there. Small team, and at the end of the day, like, I am one of you guys. Like, I am creating this to be what I wanted to exist, the yarns that I wanted to exist, and it just means a lot that you're here, and thank you for supporting me, and I hope that I can continue to bring to the table what you want to see, and it just means a lot that you're here. So let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer anything. I'll do my best in the comments, but if there's any like big topics or anything, I could do another video on and kind of go over whatever in more depth. So thank you again.